you know, talking to the community at large about what their needs of Drupal are, looking a lot at what our competitors are doing and make sure Drupal's staying relevant, these kinds of things. I wrote a book once, I was on a magazine once, yada, yada, yada. Oh, and I work for Acquia. So the agenda for today, I thought we would give a little bit of a recap of Drupal 8 from release until now. And then we'd talk about some of the barriers to adoption of Drupal 8 and then kind of go through those one by one, debunking a few myths. Some of them are total myths, some of them are not so much myths, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about some next steps on how we get going from here. So first, before I jump into here, how many people here have used Drupal 8 on an actual website so far?
No.
Is that a nobody?
Mike.
Oh, Mike. Hey, Mike. Oh, excellent. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll start there. So let's recap. So Drupal 8 came out in November of 2015. We shipped Drupal 8.0.0. This was coincidentally on Dries Buytaert's birthday, so that was like a really nice birthday present that he got. It had hundreds of release parties worldwide, so in India and Australia and Europe and the United States and South America, Africa, everywhere. Did you guys have one in Philly?
Yeah.
Awesome. Was it a good time?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
It was moderately fun. I'm gonna temper my enthusiasm.
I don't really remember like last week.
Oh, you don't remember?
It was
a great party.
It was good.
Yeah, we had one in Vancouver too, and it was cool. All these people came out of the woodwork who I'd never met before. But yeah, people had a really great time. Drupal 8 came out with lots of new features, which is always good. Web services, views, multilingual content editing, HTML5 support, better page load speed, mobile friendly, and then like 200 other things that are, awesome, but a little bit too small to measure. And then on top of that, we've been putting out new features every 6 months. So in Drupal 8.1.0, which came out April 20th, we included the Big Pipe module, which is a great performance improvement, where it sort of renders the main chunk of your page before it renders sidebars and other sorts of things. So it takes a Facebook approach. So your users get a very responsive website coming back at them without having to wait for the entirety of the page to load first. We also added a user interface for migrations, better composer support for people who like running all their Drupal sites from the command line, and support for JavaScript testing, which is really important because we're hoping to do a lot of really excellent user-facing changes to Drupal as it goes on. So for example, in Drupal 8.2, we added, and that was back in October of last year, we added content moderation and improved admin UI via the settings tray module and place block module. So these allow you, your content authors and others, instead of having to trawl around in the admin panel to figure out how to do things, they just get a little menu item and they can click it and then boom, they can add a block right in place on whatever page that they're on. And we also have been making a lot of improvements to the REST API and various other things. And 8.3.0 doesn't ship until April, but its feature freezes in about 2 weeks, and we're hoping to get in some media stuff for that, some more workflow improvements and other things like that. So pretty exciting stuff. So what's not to love? Yay, Drupal 8, it's so awesome. And yet, when we look at the usage graph, we see that even though Drupal 8 came out, back in a little bit before January of 2016, that instead of, the usage of Drupal's hockey sticking, like a lot of people predicted, it's sort of, it's fine. It's not like it's plummeting or anything like that, but it's sort of staying stagnant. And so a lot of people are kind of worried about that and trying to figure out what is up with that. So, yes. So we talk about some barriers to adoption, and some of these are more barriers than others. So one explanation for that graph numbers is that, over the course of the past 5-6 years, and Drupal 8 was in development for 4.5 of those, that the Drupal has just kind of become this thing that you use for more ambitious type projects. So if you have a cat blog that you really want to put up, you're going to use something downstream. You're going to use like Tumblr, or you're going to use WordPress or something like that. And so we're not going to get the quantity of sites that we had in Drupal's earlier years, when it was a much more straightforward platform, and these kinds of things. We also have a problem where a lot of the top contributed modules are either not ready yet or not seen as ready, and we'll talk about what that distinction means in a little bit. Drupal 8 was the back end of it was completely rewritten, so it's now object-oriented. It's modern PHP, which is really, really great in terms of you as a developer learning things that will be portable to any other PHP project you might take on in the future, or any other Ruby or Python or any other kind of project like that. However, if you learn PHP via Drupal 6 or 7, like a lot of people did, it is a bit of a jump for you, and it requires some undertaking. And then we have this horrible chicken and egg problem where it's like, so people want to port their modules, but they don't yet know the object-oriented PHP. So they're blocked on the customers asking for Drupal 8, which will give them financial incentive to learn it. However, the customers are blocked on asking for Drupal 8 because there aren't enough modules ready yet. And it's like, And so we have this kind of cycle going back and forth in a really silly, frustrating way. And then we also have an issue where the migration path from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 is still incomplete. It does the big things like your users, content, comments, etc. Dries announced that his blog moved to Drupal 8, and I have moved my blog to Drupal 8 in like testing environment and stuff like that. But the Drupal 6 to 8 migration is a lot more fleshed out. It handles a lot of the configuration aspects and other things, mainly because we wanted to focus on 6 to 8 first, because Drupal 6's end of life was February of last year. So if you're still on Drupal 6, you're running without security team support, without bug fixes, all that kind of stuff. So we figured it was more important to prioritize that. So those are some of the barriers that I know about. I noticed that not a lot of people in this room have used Drupal 8. Did you want to talk about some of the things that you've run into too? Or does this seem like a fairly complete list?
Well,
or are we scared?
Okay, you touched on my issue, which is a couple of key modules aren't ready.
Yep.
And I would say the automatically naming a path as well.
Oh, Path Auto? Yep. Yeah, that's funny. That's actually one of the examples I have later on. So yeah, we'll talk about that. Okay.
Pretty much, if I didn't have to worry about that, I would be moving to Drupal 6 right up.
Yeah, okay, right on. All right, so let's talk about some myths related to these barriers. So one myth I've heard is that, quote unquote, no one is using Drupal 8 yet. That the only people using Drupal 8 are using it in development or for personal, like, yay, Dries moved his stupid blog to Drupal 8, but I don't care because all he's got on there is some, self-aggrandizing posts about Acquia and some pictures of his kids or whatever. But yeah, there's actually a lot of sites that have moved to Drupal 8. And so here's a sample that came out of that blog post. So, MBA, NASDAQ, Berta Media, Jurassic World. If you're the kind of person who's not swayed by large evil corporations using Drupal 8, there's also a number of really great humanitarian organizations like the World Wildlife Foundation, Habitat for Humanity. YMCA is actually doing a great thing where the Twin Cities branch is developing a Drupal 8 distribution called OpenY, which all of the different YMCAs are going to be adopting, and they're going to be able to cut their IT costs by some ridiculous, stupid amount. And then all of that ridiculous, stupid amount of money gets to go back into helping kids, which is what they're there for in the first place. So they're really excited about that. And Berta is also a really interesting case in that they have done a lot of work to make a distribution of Drupal 8 called Thunder that's very focused on the media use case. So we are hoping to see other media companies adopting this. And it's great to see a company essentially giving away their work to their competitors in the open source spirit. It's actually a really, really awesome success story there. So there's actually a lot of great stuff happening with Drupal 8. A lot of these are new sites versus upgraded sites because of the migration path issue. But nevertheless, it's great to see Drupal 8 actually used in the wild. And then if you need a stiff drink, by the way, after this presentation, Jack Daniels is also on Drupal, so yay. All right, oh, sorry, did you have any comments on that?
No.
Okay, no. Another myth that I've heard is Drupal is too hard to learn. Like a lot of people feel like, I've heard, or some of the concerns that I've heard is that, Drupal 8 left a huge portion of the community behind, that there wasn't enough investment to make sure that people could make the jump from Drupal 7, which is largely procedural, naming convention based, to Drupal 8, which is largely adopting modern programming best practices, objects, inheritance, service locators, these kinds of things. But just to debunk that myth, everybody wants everybody to use Drupal 8. We don't want to leave any portion of the community behind, and there's been a huge push in the realm of resources and education to ensure that the community can make the jump. So I have a few different links here, and I'll share these slides after. But that first link has something like 160 different tutorials. This company, OS Training, is offering to give 200 of its Drupal 8 videos out for free. Drupalize Me has some free Drupal 8 resources. Appnovation has another list of a bunch of different resources. So there's actually quite a lot of really great things out there for people looking to make that jump. So if you're intimidated to start, I understand, but don't worry, it's actually not too bad. And everyone who has made that jump actually finds Drupal 8 to be much more straightforward, because essentially you learn the following like 4 new patterns, and then everything falls under those patterns. As opposed to in Drupal 7, you would often have to like, oh, hook bloody blue blue is different from hook bloody blah blah, and I just have to read the documentation and the function signatures and everything to figure out how it works. In Drupal 8, if you know what a plugin is, and you know what a service is, and you know what class and objects and that kind of thing are, then once you learn that one time, every other piece of code that you look at in Drupal 8 makes sense to you, and it's actually really, really nice. There's a partial myth, which is that Contrib isn't ready yet. So Dries gave me an assignment, and I work with Dries in the office of the CTO at Acquia, and he gave me an assignment at the end of the last year, meaning the end of 2016, like 2 weeks ago, to dig into this and figure out what's happening here. And so I've been contacting the module maintainers for the top 50 modules, and then a few other ones that aren't in the top 50 but are important, to try and gather some data on what the blockers are, why we're not quite there yet, even though we're a year out from Drupal 8, and what is standing in the way and how we can help and that kind of thing. So as of last week, this is the current breakdown, which you can see that a good chunk, 20% or so of modules in the top 50 do have a stable release. Another 16% of them are in core, so you don't need to worry about them anymore. Another 16% are obsolete, in that there are other modules that take their place, or they're obsoleted by functionality in core or something like that. So that's a good chunk of the graph that is basically fine, and you don't have to worry about it. Then there's another 7.1%, which is an RC, which I call in final testing here, because this graph was for a non-technical audience. But then the rest of it, which is 40%, by far the largest chunk on this pie graph, is in development still. And that means some portion of not started yet, only a dev release available, or an alpha or beta. And so it doesn't look good if you're coming from the outside and you're trying to get a sense of what's happening here. And I think one of the problems, so I've only talked to a few module developers so far because the holidays hit and all that, but one of the big problems, I think, is that a lot of the module developers are what I call community insiders. And if you're a community insider, how you'll often evaluate a module's readiness is you'll do something like the following. You'll pull up a project page and you'll look at the author of the module. You're like, okay, do I know that person? Is that person generally known as a reputable maintainer? And Dave Reed definitely is. Takes great care of his modules. Smart guy, everything else, awesome. And then I look at the recent commit activity. Has there been stuff going on in this module within the past couple of months? And there has. Okay, great. That's a good sign. I'll look down at the issue queue statistics and I'll be like, okay, looks like we're getting a first response within 8 hours. That's a really active maintainer. That's good issue activity. So I'm going to try this. And did it work on my site? Yeah, it totally worked on my site. So ship it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and throw that module in my production site, right? How many people evaluate modules this way?
Yes.
Yes. I'm guessing Mike does, and I'm guessing everyone else does it this way, because this is how literally everyone else evaluates module readiness. They look at the project page and they say, does this module have a stable release? And if the answer is no, then I'm not ready yet. And so they keep using Drupal 7 or they keep using Drupal 6. So, and a lot of the community insiders are really confused by this. They're like, why does it matter if the module's working? Why does it matter what the actual version number is? And the reason it matters is because all of those other statuses that are not a stable release are always deemed as not production ready in literally every other piece of software. So if you try and say in Drupal, those numbers don't matter, it's just creating another Drupalism. People do not understand that. And Core is actually leading the way here, because we go way out of our way to tell people do not install alpha, beta, etc. versions of Drupal 8 on your production website, but please, please, please help us test them. And then when the stable release comes out, then we promote the heck out of that. The other key thing, though, with Contrib is that not only do stable releases denote production ready, but they also grant security team coverage. So back here, see that little nice shield of awesomeness next to the 7 release? that means that this module has a stable release and it is covered by the security team. And that means that if a security problem is found with the module, it will go through the normal security disclosure procedures, which means a private email to the security team. They track it in a private tracker. They contact the maintainer directly. They come up with the fix, and then everybody gets that fix all at once. If they don't have that little shield, then what it means is that if we find a security issue with that module, then we're just going to post about it in the public issue queue to fix it. Because it's much quicker to fix an issue publicly than it is in the private queue. But the disadvantage is if you are using that module in production, then you're going to know about it at the same time all the bad guys do, which is not ideal. So let's not do that. So in terms of what's next, this is a short talk, by the way, because I wasn't sure how many people would be there and if you guys would have questions, but feel free to interrupt or ask me whatever you want. So if you in the audience have a Drupal 8 contrib module and it's working fine for you, consider giving it the shield of awesomeness. And if it's not quite perfect yet, you still want to get this done and you want to get that done, just remember, just like core, there's always future releases where you can add that missing feature or you can do whatever you need to do to kind of get that done. If your module legitimately still needs work and it's not ready for a stable release yet, that's totally fine. But then tell us how to help. So there's this project called the Contrib Tracker Project, where you create one issue per contributed module, and you can use the different statuses, needs review, needs work, et cetera, to tell us what the state is, and then more importantly, outline what steps are needed for help. So if you need if you're really in need of a new maintainer for your module, or you are in need of funding so that you can get time off work to work on this thing, or if you just need somebody to go through the issue queue and figure out what bug reports are valid and which ones are invalid or that kind of thing, post that, because a lot of people follow these issues and they're happy to help. They just literally don't know how. And so that's an area that I'd really love to see people focus on more. And then these contrib tracker statuses, they get shown. You see how this says this module has a pre-release version of Drupal 8. To find out more, follow this issue or download below in that big blue table. So the contrib tracker comes back to the project page and will inform anyone looking here that your module is in progress or whatever the thing is, and it will tell people how to help. Let me get back there without looking at SpongeBob again. Yep, that. Okay. Test the migration path, because if it's not working, you can help with verifying bug reports or submitting patches. I think, Mike, you've done some work on the migration stuff. Pretty much anyone who tries to migrate a site from Drupal 7 to 8 usually hits something. But the faster we can get those issues resolved, we have a new 8.3 release coming out in April. It would be awesome if we had a big push between now and then to try and get that migration path in really good shape. So the more testing we get of this, the more reports we get of this, the better off that we are. There's also Global Sprint Weekend coming up at the end of the month. I don't know if you guys are planning to do anything around that, but this is basically where everybody all around the world, all the user groups around the world, try and hold a little special event, which is like an in-person sprint to kind of focus on these things. So if you're game for it at the end of this month, it would be a great opportunity to work alongside other people in the global community to work on migrating contributed modules, fleshing out migrate path issues, these kinds of things. It's an awesome opportunity. There'll be lots of chatter and activity on Twitter and IRC and those kinds of things. And then what I'd like to do is set us a goal that we get that development number from 41% way down to something much more manageable and less scary by DrupalCon Baltimore, which is in April. So I'm going to be leading a kind of a PR push around that and kind of an educational push around that for various module contributors and trying to put together a plan in terms of how Acquia and other large organizations can try and help resolve this issue. So that's my project for the next couple of months. So that is what I have. And I would love to hear any questions or comments or insults or whatever that you have to say. So, ta-da!
Have you done a migration?
Yes, it was fairly custom.
What is fairly custom? Like you didn't touch motions code?
No, we just selectively migrated content. We only migrated about a quarter of our content.
Oh, okay.
So
it wasn't like a full.
No, it wasn't like a regular thing.
Hi, I'm back.
So what do you think like Path Auto is stable enough to use? Or do you
know that every single one of the sites I showed is probably using Path Auto. I know that There are Drupal distributions like Lightning and Thunder, and NP8 is the MD Systems one, that are definitely using that on all of their sites. So yeah, I would say that Path Auto is stable enough to use for people to use it, but you wouldn't know that from the version number. So I'm working with Bear Deer and Dave Reed on figuring out how we close the gap. For that particular module, I think the gap was basically that they're getting bug reports based on some advanced functionality that Bear Deer doesn't need in his day-to-day life. And so he's kind of like, meh, I don't know if it works or not, but it doesn't seem like we should roll a stable release of the module unless it's happening, you know. Yeah, let me find exactly what he said. My plan is to actually upgrade all or update all of the contrib tracker issues, so that's the easiest place to get that. But.
To follow that, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Does anyone else have any questions or reasons why they're not upgrading to Drupal 8? The versions?
Is it predominantly the version? Because that's been my conversations with people, is that they do exactly what I said, and they look and they're like, nope, no Drupal 8 stable release, so not ready yet. That's my assumption, is that people do that. And then people who are more developer oriented are like, oh, whatever, I'm going to install this module. I don't care if it's beta, because if there's a bug, I'm just going to ping that person about it and ask him to fix it. But most people can't do that. So this is the problem.
Doug Van has a question / comment.
Hey,
Sure.
Doug.
Hi, Doug Van.
Hey. I haven't heard this so much recently, but earlier, like in the middle of last year and beyond, I heard people complain that, yeah, there's some D8 sites out there, but they've got to have a ton of custom code to get things going. I know you haven't audited all the code of all the D8 sites out there. But in your estimation, is there a plethora of custom code keeping these things propped up?
I don't think so, because there's not a plethora of custom code keeping, for example, Lightning afloat, and a lot of these are built off Lightning. So let me screen share again real quick.
I'll talk about that briefly, because we launched our Drupal 8 site last year in April 1st.
Oh, that's a very daring release date, friend.
Well, that was our second one. We launched the first one in May of 2015. I think.
Nice. Okay.
Early beta. Anyway, but yeah, we didn't find too many places that we had to use custom code, that we weren't using custom code on our Drupal 7 site. We had there was like 1 or 2 very small features that at that time, we were using a contrib module for previously, that we might have used custom code for, but I'm pretty sure all that is caught up by now. So anything that was not, like, you know, we were using a module for D7, for Drupal 7, it's pretty much there's a module for Drupal 8 that'll do that now.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the really core kind of infrastructure functionality, like views and responsive and blah, 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 that you would have to have downloaded a module for back in Drupal 7, that's now just out of the box in Drupal 8. Yeah. And so that helps a lot in that in Drupal 7, we had a huge gap where there were essentially no contributed modules for Drupal 7 until views ported, which was like 6 or 8 months in, I want to say. And then all of a sudden there's a floodgate of all kinds of modules that got ported. But in Drupal 8, we saw this kind of like trickle of stable modules kind of happening the entire way along. Then like the big ones that people are still waiting on is something like, you know, say panels and rules and things like that. But the thing I wanted to call out with Lightning, and there's also Thunder and some of these other things, is that these guys are essentially, they've already got all of these modules set up and ready to go for you out of the box. So, you know, we've already got all the media stuff that you need figured out, okay? So you don't need to worry about figuring out media. We figured that out for you already. And then Lightning does, this is not a very good, maybe the roadmap, I don't know. But anyway, nope, that doesn't help at all. Okay, so I'll just talk. Lightning has the content moderation stuff all integrated, the layout stuff all integrated, the media stuff all integrated. And it's just, you know, it's just a distribution. So like if you look at its code repository, you know, we're looking at stuff that's like, you know, their Drupal.org make file is just going to be like, we're using this version of CTools, this version of Entity Block, browser, embed, right? And then, you know, their distribution is going to have the code to like glue that all together. but it's not doing anything. It's not like there's thousands of lines of code in this thing that is all custom. It's just gluing together what already exists in Contrib. And in some cases, maybe making a little bit prettier UI for it, and that's it. So I would call Drupal 8 ready. I think it just is depending on your, you know, your stomach and how you're willing to do it. Because you can install a stable version of Lightning, and then you don't know that behind the scenes that it's using an unstable version of PathAuto. But yeah, I think it uses see PathAuto. Yeah. So there you go. Beta 1, good enough for stable Lightning. That's all I can say. Yeah. There's another problem too with some of these is I can just riff here for a minute. Media, you go to media and you'd be like, hey, media. Oh, come on. And then Drupal.org goes out in the middle of my presentation. So you look at this and it's like, oh, it only has a development release, so media isn't ready at all, right? But if you go into this issue, it will explain that media in Drupal 8 is actually 3 different modules. It's file entity browser, it's entity embed, and it's NAD browser, and media entity is another one of them. So they've split apart this monolithic media module into smaller subcomponents, one of which is media entity, which is sort of like the frameworky thing, that kind of the base entity that you use to store your files and images and all that kind of stuff. And then this thing is not only has a stable release, but we're also targeting it to get it into core for 8.3.0. So this is the disconnect, is if you're looking for a one-to-one module replacement for what you had in Drupal 7, oftentimes it doesn't actually happen. Oftentimes you need to look at the overall solution that you're looking for, which is I need a media solution or I need a workflow solution. And then take a look at some of the distributions and what they're doing, or read some of the blog posts out there, because oftentimes the exact names of the modules have shifted and it's not always clear especially from just looking at a project page, what's what.
Awesome. It's really solid advice. Do you have any more questions, Doug?
Oh, I always have questions.
Sure.
So
I have cherry Coke, so I'm very good with it.
This is only slightly off topic. We were told that the move from procedural PHP and the Stone Age into the shiny, awesome OOP of Symfony 2 would attract a lot of outsiders who were not on our island. I know that Larry Garfield and others have been prominent faces at a lot of PHP conventions and non-Drupal conventions, etc. Angie, to your knowledge, what kind of buy-in and involvement and have we attracted from the historically non-Drupal community?
I think we're still in that awkward phase of like even insiders aren't adopting Drupal 8 because of the contributed module problem. So I wouldn't expect to see the flood of external developers until we solve that problem. So until an outsider like can look at a page and be like, oh good, Drupal 8's ready to go, we're going to struggle to get a lot of people who don't even know Drupal to use it on Drupal 8. But that having been said, I've had a lot of great experience. I spoke at PHP World back in 2014, I want to say, and kind of gave a talk that was about the growing up that Drupal 8 did and sort of the interesting, shall we say, effects that had on the community and how we handled some of that stuff and these kinds of things. And I had 20 odd people come up to me after and be like, holy shit, I need to give Drupal another look, because the last time I heard you guys talk about this stuff, you thought you knew everything. You were doing like any other project from being as good as you know what I mean? And that kind of thing, which is really sad because I don't feel like we exude that attitude. Like there's certain individuals in the community who certainly exude that attitude. But I feel like, and on the whole, I would not rate our community culture as one of elitism and one of we know better than you and one of that kind of thing. But that was definitely how we were being perceived. Because I had like people from the Laravel community, people from the Magento community, the Joomla community, et cetera, all coming up to me afterward and being like, holy crap, that was amazing, you know, kind of thing. So, and not because my talk was amazing. I'm not a very good presenter, as you can see. But that the transformation that our community had made and transformation that our project had made, and the fact that we were able to do that while still largely keeping the same base of developers that started with the project, like that was a big deal. And it really heartened them to hear the philosophies behind why we made those changes, and that we were trying to get more involved in generally embracing the larger PHP ecosystem. So I would say I think it's a wait and see kind of thing on whether we do end up with, you know, a gaggle of Symfony developers adopting Drupal and singing its praises. But I do say that early indicators are that that was definitely the right approach, because it's in contrast to WordPress and how they were perceived at that conference, which was very ungood, because, you know, because WordPress prioritizes backwards compatibility over a lot of different things. And so even though they have things like unit tests, and even though they have things like, you know, the automatic upgrader thing, which is amazing, people were still really cranky with them because they feel like WordPress, with the market share that they have, is holding PHP back. Because they could be a force for, you know, trying to get people off of old crufty versions of PHP, but instead they literally won't do that because that's who their users are. And so anyway, it was just an interesting dynamic. That conference was really cool because it was all of the major PHP projects kind of together in one place, and there was a lot of cross-pollination. So that's—
Which conference was that? Which conference?
That's called PHP World, and it was in DC that year. I don't know if it shifts around or whatever, but yeah, it was really great. It's run by the same people who do PHP Tech, which I also haven't been to, but I've heard is a really great conference. That's, yeah, but no, so my early indicators are that, yeah, it looks good. When I've sat next to Symfony developers and showed them Drupal 8 code, by the way, you know, I pop open a YAML file, they're like, yeah, that looks good, and I pop open a controller, and they're like, oh, yep, okay, no problem there, and I pop open like a block plugin, oh yeah, that's no problem, and then I show them a dot module file with hooks, and they're like, what? And you're like, they're just little functions, and you name them different things, and they're like, what? Anyway, which is basically the, you know, that's sort of the major stumbling block there. But, and I remember that even when I got into Drupal way back in 2005, because I had previous experience with like Java and C# and, I don't know, Visual Basic and all these other things, and hooks took me the better part of 4 weeks to understand. Back then there weren't books and stuff, but still it was like a really oddball thing. So the early indications as well are that people who are coming from a traditional PHP background and not from I learned PHP via Drupal background are definitely finding Drupal 8 much easier to work with and much easier to understand. So.
No more hooking around.
I know, I'm sad if all the hook jokes are, because there's so many good ones, you know, like hook-related puns and hook-related knock-knock jokes.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm the guy who asked about Path Auto earlier. And I think I want somewhere between version 1 and version 2 of module evaluation.
Okay.
You gave me one clue, which is a distribution like Lightning, which has a nice security badge. It addresses one of my big concerns, which is security, and I'm not smart enough to know what's not secure. So if something like that includes a module at a certain release level, is it reasonable to assume that if there's an issue with that module in that distribution, that would somehow come out?
I think that the normal security process would be applied, which means that it would be a public disclosure. Honestly, I think the security team would use their head in the case where it's a top 50 module, or I think a top 4 module in the case of Path Auto. Yeah. They would probably use responsible disclosure in that case.
Okay.
It would be more if you use like the bibliography module or something, and that one happens to not, I don't even know, but if that one didn't have a stable Drupal 8 release, they would probably just do it out in public. Okay. But I would say, so in general, the way the security team process works is you know, someone sends an email to security@drupal.org. It gets you know, fitted out because a lot of people are like, help, my site got hacked, you know, to security. So they have to like first vet it and make sure it's an actual security problem.
Sure.
And then once it is, they'll create an issue in the private tracker, loop in the maintainer, and then you know, they'll tell the maintainer, this is the exploit that we found. You know, here's the report. We need you to supply a patch for this within, I forget the timeline, it's like 3 or 4 weeks or something like that. At which point we'll help you coordinate a security announcement. And then those go out every Wednesday. So every Wednesday people know to like set their alarms or whatever and look for crazy security releases coming out. So that's the advantage of the Shield, is that it would go out through the normal security process. The advantage of using a distribution like a Lightning or a Thunder is that there's an organization behind those who have a vested commercial interest in not having all their customers get hacked. So you can probably bet that if something were to arise where PathAuto had a 0-day vulnerability that was out in the wild, that they would supply a patch to their distribution at the same time, or possibly, well, it wouldn't be before, but it'd be like immediately following the security team getting that public fix out there for people. So, so that's why if you're a little on the fence using one of those commercial, they're not even commercial, they're free and open source, but they're run by a commercial entity, that might be a safer bet if you don't want to, especially, I use it because I'm just fundamentally lazy. And I don't really want to know all of the stupid checkboxes to check to make my media library look like that. So I'm just going to use their thing. And they did all the work for me, and it's great, But so either of those would be good reasons. But I definitely can't say, though, that because a stable release of distribution that 300 people use, the security team would change their processes, because I don't think that's true. But I do think that because of the companies that are behind these distributions, they would certainly make sure that there's, their reputation's resting on that. Unlike the security team, who's largely volunteers and just doing what they can.
I guess the question is, that's an endorsement of using the distribution. I was wondering if I can use a distribution to evaluate a module, whether it's okay to use.
Yeah, I would. The only thing with that is just bear in mind that the distributions are often very use case focused and a little over the top in that, like the Berta Media one is going to be excellent if you need a media website. But if you're trying to set up a card catalog for a library, you're going to have to undo a lot of stuff that they do because the assumptions are different.
Right.
So what I usually do is just set up a Drupal 8 set on a development machine, install all the modules I think I need, play with them and see if it works or not, But I'm also a lot more comfortable if I run into bugs. I know to file issues in the issue queue, that kind of stuff. So it just depends on your comfort level. But I'd say if you're totally brand new to Drupal 8, a distribution could be a great way to start, because it'll show you what's possible. And then you can kind of tinker around under the hood and be like, okay, well, I want that, and I don't want that, and I don't need this thing, but that thing is cool. And you could try and almost piece together your own distribution based on copying and pasting some code from there, or whatever you'd like to do. So just know that at that point now you have your own fork of Lightning or whatever it is, and you're no longer covered by anybody. But when you're in terms of like just playing around and seeing what's possible in Drupal 8, I think that could be a totally valid way to do it.
Awesome.
Great.
That's really great. I think that's going to help a lot of people kind of navigate the scary cliff that's choosing Drupal 8.
I had something small I would share if I have a second. Let me share my screen. It's one of the other things that I think people push back on Drupal a lot, especially new versions, is they're worried it's going to be slow. And
Mike, are you MDP?
yes, I am.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just looking for the right window here. Share, there it is. This is the pinged in performance monitoring of our site from the moment we switched over to Drupal 8. Which was incidentally Oslo when our company set out a huge press release because we rebranded and renamed ourselves, which is literally right at the huge spike you see. And you can see this is the old performance in gray in the background. So you can see like Drupal 8 out of the box, we did not do any performance tweaking or tuning to speak of. It's pretty much just the Drupal 8 caching out of the box, and our site was about twice as fast.
Wow.
Which kind of blew my mind because we were just using Drupal 7 with out-of-the-box caching before that. We didn't have any CDN, any kind of like cache in front of it, varnish or anything like that. And the bottom down here shows the traffic, which was a huge amount of traffic. And
wow, that's amazing.
that's great.
So with a tiny little bit of traffic, you were doing 7.5-second page loads. And then with
On Drupal 7.
On Drupal 7, and then with way more traffic, you're getting half. Yeah, wow. Can you like maybe bring that and put it in glitter paints and put it on a T-shirt and that's awesome.
And this isn't even using BigPipe or Refresh List or any of the new.
Right, because this would have been just regular Drupal 8, right?
Yeah.
So
I think this was 0.1 maybe.
This should be our February talk, right?
Sure. So anyhow,
Awesome.
That's great. Did you guys blog about that? Because that would actually be really cool.
No, Josh from the DA was trying to get us to do a case study.
But then that's like work and effort and stuff.
Yeah.
Could you tilt the camera like one little bit so I could see Mike? Or Mike, could you lean forward? Because I just want to say hi. And I see your arms. Hi. Okay. Cool.
I'm an arm.
Yep, you're these like ephemeral floating arms, and it's a little disturbing, but yeah.
Cool. Well, any more questions?
Oh yeah, more from Doug Van.
Where are you at, Doug?
I actually am in a suburb of Philadelphia called Indianapolis. So hi everybody from Indianapolis. Oh, that was a question. Yes, Angie. What's the landscape of Drupal shops and freelancers, etc., who are capable of taking on D8 work? The graph shows that the demand is flattening out a bit, but we have Drupal shops that can handle an increase if it comes to pass.
Well, I want to be careful about what was communicated there. The graph doesn't show there's a decrease in demand. What it shows is that the usage statistics of Drupal, and those usage statistics are flawed anyway, but the number of publicly accessible Drupal 8 sites running update status module on a regular basis that have their cron set up correctly, asterisk, 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 is relatively flat compared to when Drupal 8 first came out. But that doesn't mean there aren't a number of Drupal 8 projects in the works and being developed actively now that aren't live yet. It doesn't mean that there won't be eventually a big spike that happens, blah, 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 blah. So I just want to be clear what those numbers actually are. So I don't know of a lack of interest in Drupal 8. So what I know is that immediately after Drupal 8 was released, immediately before Drupal 8 was released, we were in this awful quagmire of doom where Drupal 7 was like 5 years old at that point, 4 years old, something old. And Drupal 8 wasn't released yet. And so people are like, what the frig are we supposed to do then? Because I don't want to install Drupal 8, except for that one daring gentleman who did it in April 1st, 2016. And then did you say the other one was April of 2015?
It was like May of 15, I think. May or June.
So that's pretty ballsy, May of 2015. So most people don't have those kind of cojones, and so they were waiting until Drupal 8 was ready. And then they didn't want to build a new site on Drupal 7 because Drupal 7 was already old news. And then you don't have things like configuration management, which is a huge time saver in every single thing you're going to do with your site from that way forward. Also, you're setting yourself up for an upgrade path eventually, blah, 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 blah. So people were kind of in dire straits. Oh, what's that, Sarah?
Oh, I got kicked out.
Oh, but you're back. Okay. So people are kind of in these dire straits, and I know that that wasn't very good for the Drupal ecosystem at all. And so we needed to get Drupal 8 shipped, and we did. And then there was sort of like this, 3-month lull or whatever. But I want to say that by April of last year, Acquia was no longer building Drupal 7 sites. I know a lot of other of our partners are like that as well. Now, granted, we tend to get bigger projects, and we tend to we tend to have more resources and stuff like that. But on the other hand, it's great because it has a trickle-down effect, and that when we port a module for NASDAQ or whoever it ends up being, everybody else gets that module, which is ace, really good. So I know we haven't taken a Drupal 7 project for at least 6 to 8 months. I feel like the energy at DrupalCon Amsterdam, which was in 2015, was super, super low. Or sorry, DrupalCon Barcelona, that one was. But then by the time we got to 2016 LA, the commercial ecosystem was picking up. And then by the time we got to Dublin, the conversations I were having was that things are back on track and people are happy and they're getting calls and yay and everything's good again. So I'm not aware of any larger market lulls at the moment. The one thing I want to be careful of though is that people aren't choosing Drupal 7 because of not even misinformation. I want to be careful that people aren't choosing Drupal 7 because Drupal 8 feels a lot less ready than it actually is in practice. And they just don't know that people are using Drupal 8 out there. And I also don't want module developers resting on their laurels thinking that because they have a module that doesn't produce fatal errors that they're done. that there's still more work to do to get the rest of the community on board. So yeah. But I'm not aware of any, I mean, as far as I know, the commercial ecosystem is healthy. I definitely haven't heard, I haven't traveled as much in the last year because I've kind of had a year from hell, but usually when people are pissed off about something, they come talk to me, and I haven't had a lot of people come and talk to me about being pissed off. So I'm taking that as a positive. But I don't know, do you know of different things like in the Midwest, Indianapolis market, or in the Philly market for that matter?
Yeah, there's still the hesitancy to jump in for fear of demand. There's no ROI on ramping up the tools and the knowledge, et cetera.
Can you explain that though? Because like to me, there's only ROI because you're going on the platform that gets continuous improvements every 6 months, that both the core developers and the Drupal user community are all on the same platform for once. It's amazing. You know, you get the thing that all the new modules that are being developed are coming out for. You get the thing that has at least a 5 to 7 year lifespan left in it. Like, I'm confused on why you don't pick Drupal 8.
I've heard a lot of people saying that they're feeling like their clients aren't ready to move to 7 or move from 7 because they're so used to the workflow and where everything is at. Part of me wonders if we're just tired and if we just don't want to deal with our clients. Like if it's not so much an issue of like, is the software ready or is the software not ready? It's an issue of we just don't want, like we and our clients don't want to deal with change.
Well, I would never move to Drupal 8 just cause. The only reason I would move to Drupal 8 is because like there's a new project coming down the pipe.
Yeah.
You know, that the client already has an existing site, but now they want to do this crazy community site, blah, blah, blah. Like that would be something I'd look at Drupal 8 for. I'd also look at Drupal 8 if they're on Drupal 6. I would also look at Drupal 8 if they're planning on a crazy rebranding of the whole site that basically requires a ground-up rewrite anyway. But if they have a Drupal 7 site that's working perfectly fine, I would not be in a hurry to move them off of that. I just want to be clear. I'm pro Drupal 8, but I'm not like pro charging your customers money for no benefit.
Do you think people felt differently about 6 to 7 though? Like I'm wondering if more people wanted to push from 6 to 7, or because Drupal 5 and 7 were so different. Because it feels like 7 maybe was just like a special, you know.
I mean, I've worked at Acquia now for 5 years, and so I started at the beginning of the Drupal 7 cycle, and I can tell you, my very first job for Dries was exactly this job for Drupal 7. So like we had the same problem 5 years ago. So I don't think there's anything magic about Drupal 7 that makes it like harder to migrate off of. I mean, Drupal 7 broke every fucking thing too. I mean, you know what I mean? We worked for 3 years on that. But Drupal 7 broke it in more of a, we decided to rename this to this just to piss you off kind of way, and not like, you got actual things. Because Drupal 8, at least, it's like, we broke all of your modules, but now we're never doing that again. You know what I mean? It's like, because we adopted modern object-oriented PHP. It's done. There isn't more modern, more object-oriented. It's like, that is the thing. It happened. It's over. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So I think there was definitely a huge jump from 6 to 7, but I don't know that I would say that people were more eager to make that jump back then. Because I remember having exactly the same conversations I've been having now about 7 to 8. So.
Well, I can't remember last week, so.
So I don't even know where I am. What am I doing?
Is this a thing? Is this not a thing? I don't remember.
To add more to why individuals, freelancers, or shops are hesitant to get into D8 currently, and to defend the ROI statement, retooling and revamping. I have some kind of freelance themer type people who have dipped their pinky toe into Twig. And they love what they see. They've watched the videos. They attend the sessions at events they go to, if they're still going to events, because a lot of us are not, which is a separate topic, but I'm glad to talk about it. So at what point, they can make money today doing D7 things the D7 way, and learning Twig and getting more into OOP and learning the 4 patterns and et cetera, is just simply not a value add to them at the moment until the demand is really there, and they can jump in and grab some of the smaller end gigs, because right now it seems like it's all
that's fair. If they're caught in that horrible chicken and egg problem, of people like the gentleman back there who look at Drupal 8 and say it's not ready. Therefore, I'm not going to hire a freelance themer because why would I hire a freelance themer when Drupal 8 isn't ready? That's totally fair. Which is why I'm trying to push on the module and theme readiness end of this, because it seems like that's an obvious blocker that is really difficult to hand wave around. You know what I mean? Because it's like, yep, you're right. Like the modules don't look ready, so we should make them look ready. So yeah, I can understand it from that point of view. But I don't agree that there's any shortage of Drupal 8 work out there. I think, but maybe not for freelancers who want to do a quick $500 gig. I don't know that part of the market at all.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I could talk all day about value proposals. It's all in how you sell it, right?
I was going to say, like, what we used to do is we would just, pad our estimates and then give the community or the company credit for any community contributions that we gave back, and everybody won. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So we include the upgrading our skills in the billing, and then the company gets goodwill from the community, and voila. And it's even better now because there's like organization credit on Drupal.org and stuff, and they can turn around and use that as a promotional tool for them, as a recruitment tool for them, So I'd say, like, if you're stuck feeling like you have no choice but to work on 4-year-old technology because you can't set aside the time to invest in, bettering your skills because you can't afford the economic, impact, then just build the economic impact into your contracting.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on an hour, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Thanks for joining, Doug.
Yeah.
Thanks, Angie, for making the time.
No problem. Thanks for having me, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll get the slides exported into something, and I'll put them on SlideShare, and I'll tweet out the links. So.
Awesome. And I'll send you the YouTube link once I have that up.
Wicked. All right. Thank you so much, everyone.
You have a great night.
All right, you too. Bye.
Good night.
Yeah.